Welcome to Voice in the Wilderness. Another question we're going to look at today is how did the woman with the issue of blood know that all she had to do was grab Jesus' garment to be healed? What possessed her to go up and do that? Did she just have great faith and say, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed? And she said that within herself kind of poetically, and that's what happened? Or is there some other reason why she would do that? Okay, it's a good question, and we're going to look at it from that passage in Mark chapter 5. We're going to go down to verse 25. It says, a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but grew worse. When she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind him, and touched his garment. For she said, if I may but touch his clothes, I shall be whole. Straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. Okay, so she touched his garment. That we know that. Okay, we're dealing with why did she do that. If you were to make the case that, well, she did it simply out of faith, and I think that's true, yes, but I believe there's a much deeper understanding of her faith if we actually will go to another passage, which we're going to look at, and see why her faith, because you don't understand this in American culture, but in that culture it was incredibly offensive to touch a man's clothing that you're not married to. It's incredibly offensive. It's even more offensive to touch that of a rabbi's clothing. Because if you are unclean, as she was, it is going to defile him, and it is going to be a very impolite, very rude, offensive thing to do. And this woman was not even supposed to be around other people because of her uncleanness, because she wasn't supposed to be touching anybody to defile them. So the fact that she would go up to a very holy teacher and do this is just absolutely unthinkable, which is why when Jesus stops in the next verse, and he turns around and he says, Jesus immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, who touched my clothes? And the disciples said unto him, thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and thou sayest, who touched me? And he looked round about to her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. She's fearing and trembling. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a fact that she knew she had broken some very strong cultural and even religious laws. Okay, but Jesus is not mad at her. He says, and he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. Okay, so Jesus rewards her faith, doesn't scold her, as most would have done. And is it because he is the Lord and he's merciful? Yes, but there's more to it. And we're going to go to Malachi to find out why this is so special. It says in Malachi 4, chapter 2, but unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. Okay, that sounds poetic, but it's not. It's actually very literal. Rabbis and men that honored God in that time, even just regular, if you will, church-going, God-fearing men, were known to wear a prayer shawl. And these prayer shawls, which we all know what they look like today, we see them in the land of Israel and in big cities where Jewish populations are. It is essentially a little tabernacle. It's called a talit, which means a little tabernacle. A tabernacle, the word just means tent. It's a little tent under which they pray and worship. It's their little prayer closet, but that's another sermon, I guess, for another day. Jesus would have had one. It probably wouldn't look very nice. It was probably very humble and meager. But this prophecy says that in the wings of Messiah there shall be healing. Now the prayer shawl would have originated sometime during the Babylonian captivity, but even before then there was, and I won't get into all of it, but in Numbers, God tells the people of Israel, you need to wear what's called fringes in your garments, or a tzitzit in Hebrew. And they are tassels and corners of your garment that have fringes on them, and they're to remind you to keep the law, they remind you to pray, they're also to remind you to how you live. God is always before you, the law is always hanging before you. It's kind of a very visual thing, and you're also to have a blue thread hanging in those tassels to remind you of prayer. And so it is your little tabernacle. Everywhere you go, you have the ability to worship God in that tabernacle, and you should also live as if you are taking church with you everywhere. So it's a very powerful reminder. If you had to act like you do in church everywhere you go, don't you think you would act differently and speak differently and think differently? You would. So God is essentially saying, take the church with you everywhere. Take the place of worship with you everywhere you go, so that no matter where you are, you can do that and live that way. Well, this woman knew that if this is truly Messiah, if this is who I think it is, I can go up to him, not because of the garment. There's no magic in the prayer shawl at all, and some people try to sell it like it is some kind of mystical garment that Christians get, and suddenly your prayer life will be more powerful. If it is, it'll be because of the prayer time you're spending, not because of a garment. Okay, but she says, if this is really him, I can just go up and touch the wing of his garment, and they call the long sides of it, it looks like a wing of a bird, really. It actually looks like that. They call that the wing. She said, if I can go up to him and touch his wings, touch his hem of his garment, I will be healed, because Messiah will come with healing in his wings. And we see that in other places in the New Testament. It says, and people got close to him, if only just trying to touch the hem of his garment. Well, why were they doing that? They also understood in Malachi 4:2, there was a prophecy that Messiah will come with healing in his wings.